What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to do a full breakdown of trigger assembly and hammer 1911. First thing you're going to want to do is, just with any firearm, when you're working on it, you want to make sure it's not loaded. This one obviously isn't. Magazine is out, but good practice regardless. Okay, in order to take this trigger assembly and this hammer out, you gotta take all of these components out, and it all starts with this pin down here at the bottom. On some models you may have to take the handle off because it might cover this pin and this pin. This model, however, does not. Another thing to take note of, when you're taking this piece off, it's always a good idea to make sure that your hammer is up and not down, because this actually provides tension for your hammer when you're cocking it. Your safety mechanism should just wiggle out of place. If you do have trouble getting this out, try sliding your hammer down and it should just come right out. Now your beaver tail will come out. Your return spring. And in order to get your hammer out, it's that pin right there. Now inside here, these components, I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's a release in there, and there's also a bar that holds it all together. We're going to have to take those guts out. And it is very important that you remember how they go in. I'll show you how they go in, but take mental note because you're going to need it. In order to get these components out, is this pin right here. Now at this point they should just fall out. And there they are. Take note of this. If you put this in backwards, your firearm will not work. And once you have those components out, you're going to need a very small flathead screwdriver. And what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to push on the safety before you turn this. And it will pop out. Now the reason that took some maneuvering is because it grooves right here. And inside here, there's a spot where that groove actually fits. So you have to push your safety in and out very gently before you can find that magic spot. Once you have your magazine release out, you can now remove your trigger. It's a very simple trigger. It's just the bars and the trigger itself. Pretty neat. One way you can tell which is top and which is bottom is the bottom of the trigger will have this access port, which leads to this little screw right here. Now what that screw does is it meets with your magazine release and prevents you from pulling the trigger back any further. And you can adjust this lighter or heavier. Doesn't change the weight of the trigger, just the distance that it has to travel in order to engage the locking mechanism and the release. And once you've given everything in here a good scrub, I would suggest doing this once or twice a year. I do it about every 6 months, myself personally. Get everything cleaned, oiled, all that good stuff. You can start putting your firearm back together. However, putting it back together is a little more tricky than taking it apart. The trigger mechanism goes in the same way that you came out. She's a little stiff, so you might have to work it in there a little bit. And now comes the fun part. If you recall how this went together, an easy way to remember is that the flat part of the bar should always go on the bottom and toward the front of the firearm. So that flat piece needs to go in that direction. And another easy way to remember this piece is that the hook will always be opposite of the flat bar. I would recommend getting a pair of tweezers for this. This is very, very difficult to do. So now what you have to do is fit it in there and through that hole right there. You're going to want that to protrude just a little bit. When you're done, it should look a little something like that. Now the holes that you saw in this when you took them apart, you have to line a pin up to all that and put it through that hole right there. And what you might need to do is hold on to this while you try and put the pin in and then wiggle it around a little bit just to get it to fit to where it needs to be. Once you have these components in place, be very careful because this pin doesn't have any tension holding it in. And it is very easily moved. So pay close attention to that. Now we could put our hammer in. This pin as well doesn't have a whole lot of tension holding it into place, so it can fall out as well. Be mindful of that. A couple things to take note of. This middle piece right here needs to be above this piece. If it goes underneath it, your firearm will not operate correctly. Another thing, this slit right here in the handle, just for that. Fits in there nicely. So once again, make sure your middle bar is above your catch, and make sure that the bottom is secured in that slit in the bottom of your handle. Now it's time to put your beaver tail and your safety mechanism in place. Take your safety mechanism. And you also take note, there's this little knob right here on the top that goes in a specific way, so you literally cannot put this in the wrong way. Okay. Might need to wiggle your beaver tail around a little bit in order to get it to go through all the way. Now a little trick that I learned, so this spring action right here is meant to operate with this lip right here. And it's meant to push that spring forward. So right now that spring is depressed over here and it's in your way, right there, from pushing this all the way in. So you take a small punch or a pair of needle nose pliers if you have them small enough, get them in there, compress that spring and get it out of the way of your safety. And your safety should fall right into place. And remember, it needs to be flush with the frame of the pistol. And put the bottom part of your handle back together. This part is really kind of difficult because now this piece, which is attached to your hammer, is going to be compressed. So there's going to be a lot of tension on this right here because of your hammer. And unfortunately, until all of your mechanisms are put back together, you can't disengage your hammer. One of the tricks that I found to doing this is that if you can turn this upside down, and get that to where it's resting inside your beaver tail, so if I can get a little clearer, like so, then you'll have less of a problem actually getting that tail into this hole, because that's where it needs to go. So this upside down, and you can kind of get an idea of where that hole is. Okay, and you'll know when you have it, because you'll start to feel the tension on it when you start to push this down. Also, make sure that your beaver tail is depressed, because there's a couple of latches in there that actually go into this unit right here. There's two latches. I don't know if you can see them. Let's see if we can get it. Yeah, see those two latches go into that unit and hold the whole unit together with a pin on the bottom in order to keep the tension. And that pin on the bottom, resting up against this, pushing up against your trigger, so forth and so on, is essentially what holds the entire thing together. So do not lose this pin. This is very important. Once you have your lower handle put together and your pin struck in place, you can go ahead and test the function of your firearm, and everything should operate as normal. You should be able to engage your hammer, engage your safety, test your safety, and you also should be able to disengage your hammer with your trigger. It's very important that you do not dry fire this without that upper receiver. It's not good to dry fire any pistol, but if you dry fire this without anything for that hammer to hit, you're going to do some pretty bad damage to this steel. Everything seems to be working pretty well. Let's go ahead and get that magazine release put in, and then we'll get this bad boy put together. If you recall earlier, I told you how there's a groove on this piece that fits inside the frame of the firearm. You have to find that again. But believe me, you'll know when you do find it, because it will snap into place. Okay, you hear that snap, that's how you know you got it into place. Alright, that's all I got. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.